Hey there guys, what's going on? It's Craig Patterson for DS Sports as always, and we're in the middle of, well, I mean, there's not a lot of football going on right now, there's not a lot of sport going on right now, as obviously we've got Covid-19 having its effect on the world, and we're now in the middle of a lockdown, especially here in Scotland, the United Kingdom, and in many parts of the world. Lockdown restrictions have been imposed, but so yeah, it's a really not a great time at the moment, especially not a lot of sport going on. But I'm just gonna be in having a wee chat for however long I need to go on, 20 minutes, half an hour, just about what's going on in the world, where things might be going, when we might see things back, see how the world is gonna change in the next month or two as perhaps the virus starts to peak in some parts of the world, and obviously a couple parts of the world like China and the Far East. It seems to have declined and perhaps even stopped to a certain extent, but certainly Western Europe in Asia, it's certainly taking its effect and perhaps reaching its peak in some parts of Western Europe, and now in America it's really taken off over there. So we're going to have a wee bit of a chat and yeah, see where everything's at in the football world and the sporting world as well, and what's going on just in general really. As always guys, remember to like and subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hopefully get some future content going once further news comes in, once restrictions get lifted and further news comes in about plans in place for many different leagues, continental competitions and international stuff as well. So as always guys, thanks very much for those who are liking and subscribing. I know it's been a bit stagnant recently and it's been perhaps a month or two since I've got anything out, but yeah, obviously a lot of things have been changing. It has been quite busy, well, not recently of course. I mean, I'm basically like everyone else, kind of just stuck in their houses at the moment and trying not to do too much out with the house. I'm only really doing one or two things in the middle of this 2-week lockdown that we're in. But yeah, thanks very much guys, always appreciate the support and hopefully we can keep it going and start to build once the lockdown finishes. So yeah, just to wee chat, in the United Kingdom we are of course in a stay at home policy, only allowed to leave home for food, medical supplies, essential work and exercise as well. So we are now, I think tomorrow or today as it will now be, I think I'll probably release this later on Monday the 6th. So at this point it will have been exactly 2 weeks since lockdown measures or these stay at home measures were imposed, and yeah, we now have another week of these measures and they will be reviewed at this point next week. And we might see further restrictions, whether it means we might have exercise being banned or perhaps something new that we might not have really seen yet, or we might well see the same. I doubt we'll see anything being eased, like we might be able to go out and start being a bit more in amongst the public. There might be a few more things that we're allowed to do, but I doubt that will be in place, certainly in the United Kingdom, where we're starting to see the real ascending cases and unfortunately deaths as well, hospitalisations as well. So it's very much policy in the United Kingdom is stay at home, protect our NHS and indeed save lives in the doing so. For myself, I'm really just at home. I've not really done a lot of outside of my bedroom, to be honest. Very much been on my television, watching Netflix, watching different things. I've now started to rewatch like certain Scotland games that I've been to, some old Scotland highlights as well, and it really does give me that feel and buzz of being at Hampden and, you know, experiencing these Scotland games as well. I'm really looking forward to it. I know obviously we might not get anything until it looks like it could be September, with the Nations League kicking off. I think we'll have the Nations League first, potentially before that playoff game against Israel, which I've still got tickets for. I mean, I've got 7 tickets on my desk here. So yeah, obviously it was meant to be played in March, like just over a week ago, and it's now changed. So it was then going to be June. It was meant to be a scheduled international break in June, which I think would have counted as the warm up before what was going to be Euro 2020. It will now be Euro 2021. But as a result, I think international games have now been confirmed as postponed for the month of June as well. So we probably won't see any international action until the Nations League in September. We might well see the playoff get squeezed in October somewhere. I doubt that will be very much possible, considering that the Nations League, like all the Nations League games, there's going to be 2 in September, 2 in October and 2 in November. So there's going to be no time to fit this playoff in until possibly March, when the qualifiers start coming in for World Cup 2022. But they might well say, well, we can maybe push these back a wee bit, push the playoffs back, push the qualifiers back, and then perhaps have them going in the entirety of 2022, or delay them until later on in 2021, and then you've got an international break in March again, where we might see that playoff get fitted in. So because obviously World Cup 2022 will be held in the winter of the 2022, so qualifiers may well take place after Euro 2021, when we'll have September, October, November, and then into the new year of 2022 in the year of the World Cup. So we'll probably see the playoff take place in March next year, which is obviously a shame because we've bought tickets in advance. The game is also obviously a sellout, and we're now having to wait a year for the game to go ahead, so it is a bit of a shame. But they might also say, well, we can move the Nations League a bit later on, so we could have maybe a later round of fixtures where playoffs can take place in maybe September, and everything gets pushed back by a wee while, which would make sense, because then you can still host the Nations League finals in Euro 20. Well, actually, maybe no. I'm going off on a tangent. I was waiting to say you could have them in the summer of Euro of 2021, but obviously we've got the Euros, so it might well be that takes place in one of the international breaks in 2021 after the Euros. But we'll see how that goes. It's certainly an interesting one for UEFA, for FIFA to work out. I think in terms of FIFA, I don't think a lot will change in terms of their schedule. It's only really UEFA with the Euros going on as such. Like, so as we reported there, the Euros have been delayed by a year, which is obviously a pretty wise decision, and it's also a very, coincidence. It's a bit of a coincidence as well, because obviously you would have had Euro 2021 potentially conflicting with the following summer's World Cup, but obviously the World Cup taking place later on in 2022 in Qatar to accommodate temperatures, like the natural climate that happens in the summer months in the Middle East. So that's worked out pretty well there, which means that there's still space to then fit in, the domestic seasons, which may finish over the summer as normal, and perhaps behind closed doors environments and all this kind of chat. But also it might well be that it all works out in the end. So it seems like it'll all fall into place, but that's obviously dependent on the coronavirus pandemic and how it shapes out in these sort of countries. So yeah, obviously Euro's getting delayed by a year. There's also obviously, like we've pointed out, the leagues will hopefully be able to finish in June, July, August, and then hopefully it'll be June and July, and then we can get going with a new season of 20 to 21 season. Perhaps maybe the later part of August, but we might see that be deferred a wee bit. So yeah, that's probably from the league standpoint. That's also from that's from the international standpoint, from the sort of domestic European competitions. UEFA President Alexander Seferin has come out earlier on Sunday and has said that the Champions League and Europa League could be abandoned if coronavirus restrictions get worse. Now obviously that's not great news if you're a European football fan, and he's basically come in and said we cannot wait until September, October, when this pandemic might still be going around, restrictions might be in place. I feel like in a few countries that might not be the case. I certainly think that, going off a wee bit of tangent here on current affairs, obviously like I've said, the UK is still a sin with its cases and with its deaths. The Italians I think have now peaked, or are very much in the process of peaking. So their deaths are obviously still rising, but the number of cases are starting to get a little bit less and less and less. So I think they're starting to get towards a peak now, and the sort of main news when it comes to modelling a pandemic spread is that the reproductive number are zero, as mathematicians might read it. I mean, I'm a mathematics graduate as well, so I learned a lot from modelling and how viruses can spread and all this kind of stuff. So the reproductive number, which we'd want to be zero in the event of any pandemic, so any virus, obviously zero means that nobody's carrying it, nobody's spreading it, and that's what we eventually want to happen with the coronavirus around the world, not just in the UK. But we've now seen that in the very beginning of the epidemic and the pandemic, Italy's reproductive number was 3. So this means that for every one person that gets the virus, 3 more people are getting it. So it's almost trebling, it's quadrupling in its spread. So that's pretty terrifying thought, that, you know, if 1 million people got it, then 3 million people would get it as well. So 1 million would quickly turn to 4 million. 4 million would turn to 12 million, or 16 million, should I say. So, well, in total I mean. But, you know what I mean? So it's a pretty terrifying thought. Sorry. I'm also making sure to drink plenty of alcohol, because, you know, you don't get into a pub now. But anyway, like I was saying, so in the beginning Italy's reproductive number was 3, it is now down to 1, and 1 is where one person gets it, so another person gets it, and only one person gets it. So that's really limiting the spread of the virus. So there was a set of statistics brought out by the UK government and from the NHS England and different medical authorities, which were saying that for every one person that gets it, if you then spread it to 2.5, like the guideline figure was 2.5 people got it. So if 2 people had it, they'd spread it to 5 people. At that point, after 1 day, that would be worse. After 30 days, over 400 people would have it. I think it's 406 people would have it. And then the example they brought out is that for every one person, if you half that spread, so say if you gave it to 1.25 people, so in whole numbers, if 4 people had it, they spread it to 5 people. Okay? Then after 30 days, 15 people would have it. So it's a very small number. So that reproductive number is now, I don't know what it is after 30 days, but very little people would have it. It's less than 15 people. So now what they're wanting to do is have it go less than 1, the reproductive number. So it goes to less than 1, so it's saying that if 10 people have it, if it's 0.9, 10 people have it, then 9 new people would have it. And then it would continue to go less and less and less until the virus eventually died out. So that's a little bit of maths behind what the reproductive number is and how that affects the virus or control of the spread. But obviously we're trying to limit that, keep it as small as we can by introducing the social distancing in this country and indeed around the world. But yeah, I just thought it was like, I went off a wee bit of tangent and all this kind of stuff. So going back to where it was, so Spain and Italy, we're seeing like Italy are starting to peak now. Spain are getting there, but they're still maybe a few days behind, maybe a week or maybe just over a week behind perhaps. And then I think we'll maybe see over the next 3, 4, 5 weeks that the virus will start to really deteriorate in these countries, and then the United Kingdom itself is probably another 2 weeks behind that. So we're still ascending, so maybe in 2 weeks time we'll start to peak, and then it'll maybe take 3-4 weeks before the virus potentially deteriorates and restrictions, we can basically go back to normal at that point. So yeah, so we might see at this point, when you think about that, it's maybe sort of the end of May for certainly the United Kingdom, perhaps middle of May for Italy and Spain, where you're then saying, right, things can perhaps go back to normal, social measuring, like social distancing measures can then be relaxed a wee bit, and then we might well see some football potentially return. I'm not sure what France is like. I've not heard a lot about France. France is a little bit sort of in the we're not hearing too much about them. I think they're kind of the same as us, or maybe just slightly ahead of us by a day or two. And the Germans that we know, they're really doing well at controlling their deaths as well. So they're not getting as many people dying from the disease on a daily basis. So they're sort of the slight anomaly in these sort of death figures being astronomically huge. Like we're talking 900 a day in Spain a few days ago, 800 to 900 a day in Italy, and then we're talking about 600-700 in the UK at the moment every day. So it's obviously not great. It's obviously a huge tragedy for these people. But like I say, it could be sort of middle to the end of May that we might see some football potentially being talked about as, right, we're going to have this plan, and we're going to have this date that we start, and we're going to have this fixture list that we're going to play out, and we might have them in certain grounds or whatever. Because what we've seen in certainly in England is there's a lot of ideas being thrown about. They're talking about World Cup style camps to then say, right, these players go and stay in this hotel and they stay there, they're quarantined there just like we all are, and we'll play this team on this ground on this day, and they all play each other on these grounds, but it won't be in stadiums, it will be more like training pitches, which is obviously not great from a televised perspective. You want to see them being played in different stadiums, and obviously preferably with crowds, but obviously that's not quite possible at the moment. But you know, it's a wee bit difficult in that sense. So they're talking about that. I mean, there was one slight idea that they said, right, we're going to go off to China, who's basically got rid of it. That's a logistical nightmare. TV companies will be really unhappy with that. So that's obviously going to be a bit of a no-no. Behind closed doors, that's probably the more possible solution, and I think it's the more sort of easy solution, especially for Premier League teams as well. I mean, you're talking about, you know, Premier League teams can get away with like, I think only like match day income is like 5, 10, 15% of their overall revenue, so they can get away with having games behind closed doors and being able to play it out as such. And there's only like four or five home games, so it's not something that is necessarily essential for there to be fans and all this kind of stuff. So a lot of ideas being played around in England. There wasn't a about potentially starting start of May and finishing in June, but I think that's maybe been delayed a wee bit. There's not a lot been said about that in recent weeks, but they would be operating behind closed doors as well. Not a lot being said in Spain as regards to this. I think Javier Tebas in the beginning of the pandemic said that I think the league should be scrapped, it should be cancelled, finished, but I don't think there's been a lot said about that either. And obviously the big man, like I said, Alexander Seferin, has came out and said that we don't want leagues to be finished. We don't want to be. We want leagues. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. We want leagues to be finished, but we don't want them to be finished now. So we don't want the governing bodies of these leagues to turn around and say, right, this is it. We're going to have this. This is our final standings as of right now. Whatever they are now, we're not going to play any more football. So the season ends now. This team wins, this team goes down, so and so and so. But as far as I know, in Belgium, that's the only place where they've talked about, like, clubs have all, I think it's 16 clubs in Belgium. I might be wrong about that, it might be a little bit smaller than that. but they've all said, right, the season's finishing here. They've unanimously agreed that the season will finish, but they will then be put to the Belgian FA for final clarification. I think it's the 15th of April or somewhere around that, maybe the middle of April, certainly some point next week I think, where a final decision will be made. But like I was saying earlier, Alexander Seferin has said that it would cause Champions League and Europa League complications. So there might be some sort of legal dispute where since your league isn't finished, your teams in those positions may not have the right to say they're going into this Champions League, or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what was said, but Seferin has said your places are at risk if you decide to end. Your European tournament places are at risk if you decide to end the season now. So yeah, and Alexander Seferin has also tried to promote the fact that but being played behind closed doors, having these games behind closed doors, is better than having them not played at all. So that's the main thing. Probably try and talk a little bit more about what's happening in Scotland at home. There's not been a lot of talk on when games will be or what plans there are for when the season begins. I think they're wanting to basically try and wait for the virus to settle so that crowds can come back, because they know that there's a lot of financial problems with having games played behind closed doors for these clubs, especially clubs of full-time membership, not like they have full-time players, professional clubs. The big sort of stories about like clubs and what problems they've got is, I think Hearts are the biggest ones that have the biggest amount of stories about what's going on here. So Hearts have decided to place their staff on the government's furloughing scheme, which means that 80% of their wages will be covered by the government, and so they'll be paid 80% of their salary as a part of this government furloughing scheme that is designed to help keep workers in their employments and not have them being sacked as a result of them not being working, or laid off, should I say, is maybe the more appropriate term there. So Hearts are the ones where it's been a bit of a problem, so all their staff are on leave. They've done their sort of wage cutting in stages, so they did say, right, there's going to be 50% wage cuts to the players, to the staff, to management staff, and potentially board members as well. Stephen Naismith was obviously the one who came out public and said, right, I'm going to be part of this scheme to help my football club, and obviously as Hearts captain and probably their most senior and perhaps their more their most well-known player from an international sense, but it then became the news broke that players could potentially be suspended if they do not adhere to this 50% wage cut, and they do not take it. They could be suspended without pay and potentially led to a termination of contract. So it's not looking great if you're a Hearts fan, and there's obviously the possibility that the season may well end and potentially the final positions being final, and that would mean that Hearts would be relegated automatically into the Championship. Now there's also Ambudge, the Hearts chairman, has said that there would be a legal dispute if that was the case, because the league constitutes, or the constitution of the league is that 38 games must be played and not any less to decide the appropriate league standings. So that would be the legal dispute. Rangers would also have a legal dispute with, obviously, Celtic would then be granted the league, and Rangers would be obviously very much against this, not just because of the local rivalry, but also with the fact that they're mathematically and with a chance of winning the league. So, you know, there's a lot of ifs and buts, but it sounds like it'll either, from a Scottish perspective, it'll either be the league finishes and final standings will be the league standings will be final as of today, as of the last match day, or they will be continued later on in the summer where crowds can potentially get in, and which may lead to a delayed 2020-2021 season. So that's what's kind of been going on in Scotland. There's not much else apart from that. Not a lot of other, I think players have potentially, or teams have potentially imposed wage cuts on players and maybe furloughed their staff as well, as have Hearts have done with the non-playing staff. Apart from that, I don't really know what else. I mean, there was in England. There was obviously the health secretary, man Hancock, came out in his daily briefing on Saturday the 4th of April and said that all Premier League players should be playing their part and taking wage cuts, which I think is a little bit distasteful from the health secretary to say Premier League players themselves have to be taking this cut. There are a lot more beneficial people in this country who have more money, who perhaps don't pay as much tax as well. So obviously Premier League players are of course taxpayers in their own right, just as you and I are, if you're watching the United Kingdom of course. So I feel like going out and just saying that they have to play their part, like almost, singling them out as saying they're not doing their part. I know a few players are really doing their part. Obviously Toby Alderweireld has been donating electronic tablets to the elderly so that they can video chat their families and all this kind of stuff. Apparently he's been really helping out with that. Marcus Rashford has been really helping out with these kids, helping out with kids' charities. A lot of players are doing sort of charity FIFA streams or something like that on Twitch and donating the money to charity. And then, so yeah, I think it's a little bit distasteful to just single out these Premier League players and say, right, you're the ones who need to come out and do your part and take your wage cuts and try and help out the NHS and try and help out different parts of the community. So I have a little bit of a problem with that, but that's the Premier League and the PFA have come out and said that they're going to try and organise that all players take a 30% wage cut, and I think they've also decided to set aside a crisis fund, so I think it's totaling 20 million, which they'll then donate to the NHS and to coronavirus help and charities. But yeah, and then there's I think the PFA have also tried to apply this to all of the English Football League as well, and yeah, the fact that there's so much heat on players to then do this has meant that it's it's becoming a bit of a stress for players as well to then say, I'm giving up this amount of money, and it's a bit sort of, yeah, it's difficult to really put it in a normal sense. It's in a sense in general, it sounds like, I mean, I'm struggling to kind of find the words for it myself, but yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on with players' wages and around plans to get these leagues back up and running. We obviously hope to see them back up and running. I don't really know there's much else I can really add, to be honest. We've kind of gone over a bit about the coronavirus itself, around leagues, and especially different leagues around Europe. Obviously, well, I mean, the other one is we're kind of watching Belarusian football at the moment. Belarus are still going ahead as normal. They're not backing down from it. They're still having football games with crowds. The Premier League, Belarusian Premier League, still up and running. And yeah, they've kind of seen the effects of it, with more countries around the world wanting to pay for their TV rights to show some football. So it's quite a funny one going over there. They're very hard as nails, saying, right, you have to drink alcohol, and I think there was something else that they said, drink alcohol and Sorry about that. I didn't realise that kind of got that. I forget that there's a 30-minute limit on this, on the camera. So we're talking about Belarus. They're saying that it's very hard nails, and we're going to play through it. We'll drink vodka, and there was something else I can't remember that they were saying will help beat the coronavirus and will help keep us going. But yeah, so that's another one that we're all talking about, and obviously it's a bit, going against the grain, and it's maybe not quite the best thing to do from a health standpoint with this virus kicking about. But there's not a lot things we can really say. Yeah, like I say, there's not a lot. I've kind of gone over this few leagues and how they're getting on, what their plans might be. All football is pretty much suspended indefinitely. There's no real. There was dates in the beginning, like obviously Premier League were 3rd of April, and now they're saying the 30th of April, and now they're saying it's going to be. They're not going to be any in May either, or certainly the start of May. So yeah, it's all suspended indefinitely until further notice. So there's no real plan. They're obviously still trying to discuss plans in place about what happens when they move forward. So talked about international football, talked about the Champions League, Europa League. Yeah, not really a lot else to say apart from thank you very much for watching, guys. I know this is obviously a bit of a new one for me to put out. No real sport to talk about apart from, well, there was the Virtual National yesterday, Virtual Grand National, won by Potter's Corner, 18 to 1 shot, and the whole thing raised £2.6 million for NHS charities together. So also a great way to go about recreating the Grand National, and for everyone to get involved and get a wee bit excited about something. I had 25 quid in total on it and didn't win a penny back, so that's £25 that I've spent that's going towards the NHS Charities Together Fund, which obviously is a great thing regardless. I'm not quite so sad about losing money on the Grand National this year. But yeah, I won one little bit of sport, albeit virtual, that ended up happening, and also raised money in the process. So that was great. Yeah, like I say, thanks very much, guys. Not a lot of sport going on. We might have a few more videos once updates get updated. We might talk about a few other things as well. I might try and get back to my A Nation's Greatest series at some point. I've been a little bit, not so much motivated to do it. I just wanted to come on, have a chat and just talk about what's going on. But nonetheless, guys, thank you very much. I'll hopefully be back very soon, but until then, if you're in the UK, stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives. You'll be doing a good thing by doing that, and you'll also be able to get back to normal life as soon as possible. Everywhere else, I hope there'll probably be something very similar. Do stay at home, do protect your National Health Service, do save lives, and we'll all get through it together. So until the next time, guys, thank you very much, and we'll see you guys very soon. Please take care.